156930175 is not available. At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options. We didn't get your message either because you were not speaking or because of a bad connection. To disconnect, press 1. To record your message, press 2.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Sure. That's going to provide feedback. See?
Emily, Stephen, this is Flora. Can y'all hear me okay?
Thank you, Chancellor Tidings. Hey, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm having a small technical difficulty here at THEC. We're in the process of making sure that our Cisco software is operating. Can everybody hear me?
You're breaking up. This is Cindy McPhee.
If someone could say yes, that would be very helpful.
Yes, this is Mike Licari at Austin P. I can
Oh,
hear you.
thank you.
You're chopping up a
Thank
little
you.
bit, but
So
This is
we're working through some technical difficulties here as soon as we're able to. Thank you for your patience.
okay, thank you.
You can mute again.
Good afternoon. This is Stephen Gentile. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your patience as we are navigating the technical difficulties that has been a part of the conversation nationally for the last 18 months. I appreciate you guys for calling in. We're going to do a quick roll call to see who is online to be sure that we have a quorum.
So when you hear your name, if you could please unmute yourself and let us know that you're on the call so that we can take our quorum vote, that would be very much appreciated. Starting with Emily House, Executive Director, Higher Education Commission. Here. President Randy Boyd, University of Tennessee.
This is Linda Martin attending on behalf of Randy Boyd.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Chancellor Flora Tidings, Tennessee Board of Regents.
Present.
Thank you, ma'am. President Michael Licari, Austin Peay State University.
Present.
Thank you, sir. President Brian Noland, East Tennessee State University.
Present.
Thank you, sir. President Sidney McPhee, Middle Tennessee State University.
Present.
Thank you, sir. President Glenda Glover, Tennessee State University. Okay. President Phil Oldham, Tennessee Tech University. Okay. Let's start. President Glover, are you on the phone? Okay. We'll come back to those. President David Rudd, University of Memphis. Commissioner Butch Ely, Department of Finance and Administration.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Comptroller Jason Mumpower.
I am here and I am traveling today in an iffy area. In the event I should not respond when called upon, my designee, Lauren Spires, is on the call and can respond on my behalf. But for now, I am here.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Brian Kelsey, Senate Education.
Michael Marin here on behalf of Senator Brian Kelsey.
Thank you, Michael. Chairman Bo Watson, Senate Finance, Ways and Means. Chairman Mark White, House Administration, Education. Chair Lady Patsy Hazelwood, House Finance, Ways and Means. Peter Mueller, Office of Legislative Budget Analysis.
I'm here.
Thank you, Peter. Catherine Hare, Office of Legislative Budget Analysis.
Here.
Thank you, Catherine. We have 11 currently present, and that is a quorum.
This is Glenda
Hi,
Glover.
guys.
Hello, this is Glenda Glover. You all had me
Hey,
on
President
mute.
Glover.
Yes, you all
Hi,
had
President
me.
Glover. Thank
I
you.
couldn't unmute myself. I tried, so finally I'm unmuted.
All right. We got you. Thank you.
Oh, and before you move on, Stephen, President Oldham, are you on the phone?
I am. I was having trouble with my audio, but yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, sir. And then one last time, President Rudd, have you been able to join us? Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. Before we get started on the next phase, I want to iterate here that this body, and we'll talk about this body and its charge and responsibilities in a few minutes, has been a discussion about how the formula could and should potentially change over time. It is not historically a voting body. We are not voting on proposals here. That is done by our commission for changes to the funding formula. However, the one vote that we do need to have today is about the necessity of making this a virtual meeting. So I'll read this statement here. Committee members, as you may have determined from the introductions, we do not have a quorum that is physically present here in the THEC Buccaneers conference room. As such, Tennessee Code annotated 844-108B2 requires that the committee make a determination that a necessity exists in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication. A necessity means that the matters to be considered by a public body at a meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. In this case, 3 facts support the determination of necessity. First, pursuant to TCA 497202G, the committee is required to meet annually to serve as a review committee to aid in the development of the funding formula. Second, the commission is scheduled to meet on the 22nd of this month, and any staff recommendation to the commission as reviewed by the committee must be sent to the commission members in a timely manner in advance of that meeting. Third, scheduling conflicts and other commitments prevented most members from being physically present today.
Thanks, Dr. Gentile. Given his comments just now, I move that based on the summary provided by Dr. Gentile, a necessity exists for members to participate electronically, and that the adoption of this motion and Dr. Gentile's recitation of the facts and circumstances on which the determination of necessity is based be included in the minutes of this meeting.
Dr. House made a motion for determination of necessity. Is there a second?
Second, this is Brian Nolan.
Thank you, President Nolan.
President Nolan.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal Collins, can you please read the roll?
Emily House.
Aye.
Linda Martin.
Aye.
Chancellor Tidings. Chancellor Tidings. President Licari.
Aye.
Thank you,
Aye.
Chancellor Tidings. Yes, sir. Thank you, President Licari. President Nolan.
Aye.
President McPhee.
Aye.
President Glover.
What are we voting on,
President
please?
Glover.
So what are we voting
Yes,
on?
ma'am. Oh, we're
Just on the necessity that we are meeting electronically, ma'am.
Oh, aye.
President Oldham.
Aye.
President Rudd. Commissioner Ely.
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Michael Marin.
Aye.
Thank you. Senator Watson. Representative White. Representative Hazelwood. Peter Mueller.
Aye.
Thank you. Catherine Hare.
Aye.
That's 12 ayes.
Yep.
That is enough.
Great, thank you all. So I will kick us off just very, very briefly. Thank you all for being with us today. Really appreciate first and foremost everyone's engagement in these discussions to this point, both in the form of the working group as well as this convening that we're doing now of the review committee itself. The team here at THEC has spoken with most everybody, each of you individually over the past couple weeks, and we're very appreciative again of your time and your engagement in those conversations. The idea today, as Dr. Gentile said, is that we will not put anything to a vote. The idea is that we will continue the discussions of the working group with this different composition of people and of stakeholders. These are big topics, these are big policy issues, and we anticipate robust discussion, which is as it should be when discussing a matter like this. The little caveat to that is considering the format and considering that we are trying to moderate a WebEx, please be respectful of each other. Please don't talk over each other. Please use the hand raise function if needed. Some of these calls that we did in preparation for this meeting today got a little heated, and that's okay because this is a big topic. But please let's all just be respectful of each other and allow folks each the time to speak. Dr. Gentile will speak a little bit more about the process. You all heard me say on each of our phone calls that we have taken the feedback we have received from various stakeholders about the perception of this feeling a little too expedited. So we are pumping the brakes a bit, slowing down a bit, and Stephen will talk a lot more about that. Again, always appreciate that feedback, and this will be the first discussion of this group of many moving forward. That's really all in the form of my preamble. I look forward to this discussion, really unpacking a lot of these big issues, big potential changes to the formula. And I, again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to your staff for their engagement on this as well. And with that, I will turn it back over to Stephen.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. House. And as you mentioned, we will be monitoring hand raises throughout this conversation. If you are calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *3. And then we will call on you, and then your hand can go away. Understanding how difficult this might be while people are driving, we, of course, if you can't raise your hand at the time, that's fine. Of course, we'll recognize you. I want to give a brief overview of the charge of our commission and this formal review committee. First of all, our commission in 497202F1 is charged with developing and utilizing an outcomes-based funding formula to distribute in a fair and equitable way all the state funds for our universities and community colleges. 497202G gives the commission the authority to establish a review committee to aid in the development of that model. And we are to meet and convene annually, and that is this body here. In practice, we do, of course, meet annually. However, we think it important to hold large changes off for a 5-year review in order to be consistent in what we are incentivizing across our institutions. So the formula was created back in 2010. We revisited back in 2015, and we were to initiate a revisit in 2020 for large review. When we do revisit, we have the statute as our guiding principles on what to do. First of all, we are to use the outcomes-based funding formula in all funding scenarios. That's F1 of that statute. The formula will align the education goals of the state from our master plan, providing incentives for productivity improvements consistent with the statewide master plan. And then also the formula will continue to incorporate outcomes across a range of variables, reflecting differences in institutional missions. That's why we have a robust portfolio of outcomes. And Crystal will go briefly into how that formula it works right now. Finally, any new outcomes that we incorporate into the formula needs to be based on data that is high integrity and consistent. So therefore, even if this committee or the commission believes that we should measure something new in the formula, if we don't have the data, we will not integrate that into the formula until we're able to actually collect the data. This 5-year review, for the timeline slide, this 5-year review initiated back last year, February 2020, was our first time that we convened the working group made up of representatives from this group. We met in February 2020 to discuss feedback that we've heard from this body over the years, from our commission. We engaged with each of you via letters asking for your individual requests for revisiting here. And of course, we shut this down in 2020 with respect to all the stakeholders who had to focus on the pandemic and their responses. We didn't think then was a good opportunity to focus on changing the formula. We reconvened that committee, that working group, I should say, from March through June of this year, 2021, going through a lot of different discussion items, opportunities, challenges that have been identified in the formula over the years. Right now, we are engaging with the Formula Review Committee, and this is the first of what should be several convenings of this body through fall 2021 to help provide discussion and background and feedback on proposed changes, proposed recommendations that we want to send to our commission. Our next step after this is to go to our commission and present in July the recommended change for immediacy that we have right now to identify for one outcome for immediate incorporation into the formula. And then after the 5-year review with the Formula Review Committee, present all the recommended changes in November 2021. The process doesn't stop there. The next stop after that is to convene and to present our recommendations to our House and Senate Education and Finance Committees for review and comment. And again, that is in statute. And should they have feedback that would want us to revisit our recommendations, we will come back to the commission in May in 2022 to finalize our recommendations based on all the stakeholders' feedback. In the summer and into the fall, our staff work to integrate the new data definitions. Institutions submit data under the new definitions. And then in November 2022, we make a formal recommendation based on that new formula from that 5-year review and submit the approved from the commission budget to all state stakeholders, including finance and administration, comptroller, and the legislative budget office. So moving forward, as we mentioned before, there are some things that we need to address sooner rather than later, and then a whole bunch of things to address in the next few months. But before we get there, I want to hand off to our Senior Director of Fiscal Policy, Crystal Collins, to provide a very high-level overview of what the formula is right now and how it works. Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Dr. Gentile. I just want to do one clerical thing before we move on. We believe that President Rudd has joined us as an attendee. And so what we're going to do is, President Rudd, if you can hear the sound of my voice, if you're able to press *3, that will indicate to us that your hand has been raised, and we will promote you to panelist status and then move you into the attendee market. Okay, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move on into the presentation. Good afternoon, members. I wanted to start today's meeting by providing a brief overview of the mechanics and performance of the 1521 outcomes-based funding formula. As you are aware, the funding formula is made up of 4 major parts: outcomes, or the traditional measures we use to measure performance; focus populations, the way we recognize differences in success for different types of students; weights and scales, the mathematical ways we assign worth to our outcomes; and fixed costs, a portion of funding that recognizes constant costs related to brick and mortar commitments at each of our institutions. This slide presents the outcomes used to measure success in the current funding formula. And for those of you joining on the phone, it shows the university sector outcomes and the community college sector outcomes. The outcomes-based funding formula in Tennessee has always incorporated a range of outcomes to help reduce the volatility from year to year, while also limiting the number of outcomes to ensure focus of our institutions on what is most important. The outcomes highlighted here are progression metrics and our undergraduate awards are eligible for increased worth should the student who triggers that outcome be a member of one of the model's focus populations. This next slide details our second major component. The current outcomes-based funding formula recognizes increased intensity of intervention and expense by institutions, leading to success for certain demographic populations. This includes adult students, those who are 25 or older at the time the outcome is achieved; low-income students, those ever eligible for the Pell Grant; and in the community college sector, those deemed academically underprepared, either through a placement exam or a score on the ACT. Additionally, these focus population premiums are stackable. What that means is a student who was both low income and academically underprepared who achieves an associate degree, that associate degree for that student is not worth 1 degree for the institution, it is worth 2 degrees, as it has received a 100% premium for the success of the student who qualified for 2 focus populations. The next components are weights and scales, the way the formula mathematically assigns worth. Scales are determined using standard deviations and are constant within a sector. We'll talk more about a recommended scaling change later in the presentation. Weights reflect institutional priorities while also being mission aligned. As institutional missions become more complex, the weight structures change to reflect this. Related to this slide, in general, complexity increases from left to right. So we've outlined here doctoral and law degrees to show this growth or this change in complexity from UT Martin, which is an institution that does not offer doctoral degrees, so has 0% weight, to our flagship institutions, the University of Memphis and UT Knoxville, that have 15% and 12.5% respectively. At community colleges, a system-wide weight structure was implemented as part of the last 5-year review process. This policy decision reflected the focus of the community colleges on associate degrees and certificates. Flexibility to reflect differentiation was allowed on 4 of the 8 outcomes shown here in white. Now, the next few slides are just going to be a brief overview of the changes in outcomes since the implementation of the formula. First, let's take a look at undergraduate award production since 2004-5. 40% more bachelor's degrees were awarded in 1920 than were awarded in 2004-5. And over that same period, enrollment only increased less than 8%. So a 40% increase in bachelor's degrees and a less than 10% increase in enrollment. Since the formula was instituted, those middle numbers, nearly 15% more bachelor's degrees have been produced annually, even while enrollment at our universities has been steadily declining from the high of the recession back in 2008. Annual associate degree production has almost doubled in the last 15 years, with a nearly 40% annual increase since the formula has been implemented. Looking specifically at university outcome production attributable to the most recent funding formula, the 15 to 2021 formula, all degree production is up an average of nearly 15% since 2014-15, and graduation rates have increased 10%, from 57.3 to 63.1. This is about a 6 percentage point increase. In fact, all outcomes in the university sector are up, save for the 30 semester credit hour progression metric, which is really basically flat, with a difference of only 183 credit hours on a base of about 18,000. And again, this has been happening even as undergraduate enrollment across the sector has been declining. Well, moving on, we see a very similar but more pronounced pattern at the community colleges, with an average increase in all degrees and awards of 25% in the last 5 years. Associate degrees alone have increased more than 30%. Additionally, community colleges are being more efficient in their award and certificate conferrals. Awards per 100 FTE has increased over 25%, while enrollment at these institutions has only increased 3%. So the increase in awards per 100 FTE is being driven by the awards production, not by an increase in enrollment. Finally, while these increases at our community colleges are large, reflecting, as all of you will be aware, the implementation of a large financial aid program and other policy changes at the community college sector, the share of funding, which is what drives the appropriations to our institutions, the share of funding awarded to the community college sector has increased only from 27.2 to 27.6. That's a 0.4% increase. Are there any questions about the current formula? Okay, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Ms. Collins. To move forward, the agenda is structured to immediately discuss a proposed recommendation to change the formula for the most upcoming review, for the most upcoming appropriation recommendation in November. And then we'll have a number of items to discuss either today or over the coming meetings that include a workforce investment premium, a graduation rate outcome, something to do with fixed costs and how that is working through our formula, a low-income focused population premium, and a workforce training outcome definition change. I do not anticipate getting through all those agenda items today because ideally we'll save some time to have a conversation about observations and challenges that you believe that we should address in the coming meetings. So first off, the associate degrees, an outcome that we like to change in this cycle for making a formal recommendation to our commission. As discussed earlier, when we are charged with promoting this formula, we must ensure that there is a fairness and equity among all the outcomes. We believe and detect that there's an outcome that is not applied evenly across the university sector, and as well has a value that differs from university to community colleges, and that is associate degrees conferred by the university sector. Currently, there are 2 universities that confer associate degrees, Austin Peay, which has several, and TSU, which has dental hygiene. Last year, they gave out 9 associate degrees. The history of associate degrees in the university sector goes back decades. At one point, most universities had associate degrees. In the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2005, our commission produced a master plan amendment and a plan of action, as it is called, in which one of the recommendations was to gradually phase out all associate degrees except for those that are allied in allied health, nursing, or offered at Fort Campbell at Austin Peay, understanding that Austin Peay is serving a unique population of military-affiliated students who may, due to their itinerant nature, need to leave the university before getting a bachelor degree. So by 2005, these associate degrees had phased out to what we have right now, again, at TSU and Austin Peay, based on what the commission put out forward then. Moving forward, Ms. Collins has 2 recommendations that we have to address associate degrees because there's been a change in how associate degrees are awarded at Austin Peay in recent, and that led to a 175% increase in associate degrees at the institution. Austin Peay implemented a retention strategy to help students on their way to a bachelor degree maintain that momentum, that milestone. And this is not a discussion as to whether that is a good or not good policy. It's more a discussion on the fact that no other university has the associate degree in liberal arts that replicates a transfer type degree that University of Austin Peay has. So Crystal's going to go into the details of what our recommendations are today. Crystal?
Thank you, Stephen. So I'm going to give a brief overview of all of the discussions that we've had here with THEC staff, with working group members, and then also with each of our committee members during our pre-calls. And then after that, we will make a recommended proposed change, and then we will move into discussion on the recommended proposed change and information provided. So, as Stephen mentioned, THEC staff are recommending 2 proposed changes to how the university conferred associate degrees are treated in the formula. We believe that these recommended changes address inequities in the formula that should be dealt with immediately. First, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are recommending addressing a discrepancy between the scaling in the university and community college sectors for the associate degree. Scales are used to make values of different magnitudes comparable prior to converting those outcomes to points. So scales in both sectors are mathematically derived and centered on the relative value of a bachelor's degree, which for the purposes of THEC's funding formula is set at 1. Due to mechanics of the formula, associate degrees in the university sector receive the same scale as the bachelor's degrees, so a scale of 1. While in the community college sector, those same associate degrees receive a scale of 1.5. Essentially, an associate degree to community college is worth about 2/3 of what the same degree is worth in the university sector currently. Through analysis of the average university data in the 21-22 funding formula, THEC found that under the current scaling of 1, again, applying the bachelor's degree scale to associate degrees in the university, the 188 associate degrees that were on average awarded in the university sector were worth about 188 scaled points. Again, 188 degrees divided by 1. If the scale in the university sector had been the same for these degrees as they would have been treated had those 188 associate degrees been awarded in the community college sector, these 188 degrees would have been worth 125 scale points, 188 degrees divided by 1.5. The second recommended proposed change encompasses a definitional change affecting which university conferred associate degrees are counted in the funding formula. All associate degrees conferred by institutions have historically been included in the funding formula. As Stephen mentioned, however, most associate degrees in the university sector have been phased out over the last 15 years. Technical associate degrees are still offered by 2 universities, as Stephen said. Austin Peay State University, which has an Associate of Applied Science in Professional Services and another in Engineering Technology, and TSU, which has an Associate of Applied Science and Dental Hygiene. These associate degrees, these technical associate degrees, are meant to be terminal in nature. They are, quote, the goal of enrollment for those students. APSU, however, is the only university with the ability to provide the Associate of Science in Liberal Arts. This is an associate degree designed to serve as either a complete 2-year education program or a transfer degree to a bachelor's degree program. Per conversations with Austin Peay over the last several months, they've told us that 42% of students who declared their intention to pursue an associate degree identified it as the highest or terminal award being sought, ostensibly treating that associate degree as the terminal degree it was intended to be. That means that 58% who declared for an associate's degree intended to continue on for a bachelor's degree, which they most likely would pursue at Austin Peay. And this intention is very visible in the data. Austin Peay awarded 1,038 liberal arts associate degrees, so again, the non-technical associate degrees in 1920. This was a 175% increase compared to the 378 awarded in 1819. Of all associate degrees awarded at Austin Peay, 1,059, Austin Peay indicates that 654 of those graduates immediately re-enrolled at APSU in fall 2020 in pursuit of a bachelor's degree. This means that at minimum, 60% of associate degree recipients showed right back up at Austin Peay to continue their education in the next semester. Additionally, this does not appear to be a quirk of this potential anomalous spike in associate degrees awarded in 1920. Of the 406 total associate degrees awarded in 1819, 254 re-enrolled at Austin Peay in pursuit of a higher award. Here too, that's over 60% of award recipients that did not pursue the associate degree as the terminal award. As Stephen mentioned, no other university is able to provide this milestone award to students and reap the benefits of this type of outcome in the funding formula for students on the pathway to bachelor's degree completion. Students who complete an associate's degree and stop out, defined as not re-enrolling at the awarding institution anytime within the following academic year, meet the original intent of these degrees as the highest award attained. So, based on the analysis completed by THEC staff and taking into account THEC policy and feedback provided by various stakeholders, including members of the formula working group and several members of the committee present today, THEC staff are recommending the following proposed changes related to university associate degrees. First, to address the scaling inequity for associate degrees in the university sector, THEC staff recommend implementing the same scale at universities for associate degrees as is implemented at the community colleges. This can be accomplished mechanically in a manner that meets the guiding principles discussed by Dr. Gentile at the beginning of the presentation. Second, to address the inequity and opportunity to succeed in the associate degree metric in the university sector, THEC staff are recommending that the inclusion of university-conferred associate degrees be limited to those who do not re-enroll at the awarding institution at any time in the following academic year. THEC staff are proposing accomplishing this by instituting a definitional change in which only students who attain an associate degree and then stop out are counted in the university formula. This can be accomplished mechanically in a manner that meets the guiding principles previously discussed by Dr. Gentile. However, this will require that associate degree data in the university sector be lagged 1 full year to allow for re-enrollment in the following academic year to be determined. We're now open for any feedback or questions or concerns related to this proposed recommended change. And I will just remind everyone, we're here and we're monitoring hand raising. So if you would like to raise your hand, if you're able to in front of a computer, if you're joining us by phone and you're able to press *3 to indicate, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll Wild Wild West it and see what happens. So any comments or concerns about this? Yeah, Dr. Licari.
Yeah, thank you. You know, and I just, on behalf of all of us here at Austin Peay, feel that I need to weigh in just a bit, just to help, you know, folks just appreciate, you know, the situation here at the university, what we're trying to do for our students. And of course, as was mentioned, you know, Austin Peay has been awarding associate's degrees since the 1970s. When we got approval to start with the AS in liberal arts and an AAS degree in 1977. So this isn't exactly new, as was mentioned. It's part of the fabric of the institution, really, and the essence of Austin Peay in terms of fulfilling our mission regarding the unique student body that we serve. And, you know, it's gotten to the essence of the university to the point where 40%, 41% of our first-time freshman class coming in the door on average over the last 5 years is, you know, seeking an associate's degree. So this isn't a small issue for us. This is, you know, one that affects, you know, almost half of our incoming student body on average. You know, as was mentioned as well in the memo and in Stephen's introduction, you know, the university has been deploying all of the tools in its toolbox in order to try to help students across the graduation stage. I think that's a great thing. We've added value to their experience. We've helped them lead more successful lives, more productive in the workforce, and you know, added tremendously, I think, to the attainment and progress towards the drive to 55. So I don't think that's a bad thing. We can argue about whether or not it's, or debate whether or not it's within the appropriateness of what the university ought to be doing, but I think it's always appropriate to help students get across the graduation stage. And then at the end of the day, it's about the students, and Austin P enrolls, a more diverse population compared to all of the other public universities in the state regarding Pell eligible students, adult learners, Hispanic students, and in combination, part-time working adults and things like that. So these are students that are going to struggle to get 4 years under their belt. And so, being able to seek that 2-year option, I think is particularly important. And then lastly, I do again have to, and I know it was raised, but I really do need to stress the importance of associate's degrees, particularly the AS and liberal arts for our military students. A primary component of our mission here in Austin P is supporting the military community at Fort Campbell through these degree programs. And the AS and liberal arts in particular is that flexible degree that military personnel really, really need, because at a moment's notice, they're going to be redeployed. They're going to move to another duty station. They're going to move around the country or internationally, and having a portable degree or progress towards a portable degree is going to be very, very helpful to them. And that information comes straight from, the generals on my staff. So this isn't something that I'm just trying to make up here. This is particularly serious for the university, and we are different. We have more than triple the number of students in uniform than all other public and private universities in the state combined. And so this is a very important topic for us. Our commitment to serving this particular student population is critical for the university. Frankly, is critical for the military, and is critical for the state of Tennessee. Our ability to engage in Fort Campbell as the only Tennessee institution allowed to operate on that facility is absolutely imperative for us. And so I do want to make sure that everybody understands that, and that the importance of our ability to offer these degrees and get some incentive to do so is absolutely critical for us. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Licari. I want to clarify just one thing, that the recommendation we have today is how to recognize this in the formula itself. It is not an action to directly address the associate degrees on offer at Austin P. It's just how it's measured. I know that you weren't implying otherwise, but I think that's just a clarification for the committee overall. I believe President.
Thanks, Stephen. I wasn't implying that necessarily. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood the importance of these degree programs for us, but do wish to continue to have an incentive to continue driving resources into better serving these students as best we can.
Yes, sir. Thank you. President Oldham of Tennessee Tech.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I certainly appreciate Mike's comments, and I'm pretty sympathetic with his position. I do have a question though, because I think this is a pretty reasonable and fair approach to this issue. But the lag time in counting associate degrees, have you guys thought about how to handle that in year one, since the previous years have already been counted before?
Yes, thank you, President Oldham. We have. So we will, as you have astutely recognized, we will have to revisit the same data that was previously used, but it will be at a lower level. So if this change were to be instituted, the next funding formula, which would be for 22-23, would include associate degree data for the universities that start in 1920 and work backwards, not in 2021. So yes, we would be recounting the same data that was included in this year, only under the new definition. So we would also be resetting the base. We actually have precedent for this when we changed the research and service metric about 3 years ago. We also had to move to a lag for that, and that was due to a source change, but it was also a definitional change. And so we did have to basically freeze the years of data, though the amount measured was not the same because of the definitional change. So yes, we have thought of the mechanics and the way to institute it because of the lag in data. Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other feedback, comments on these two recommendations?
This is Brian Nolan. I have a follow-up question on the associate degrees at Austin P.
Yes, sir.
If my understanding is correct, the expansion in the number of graduates moving through this program is a relatively recent phenomenon. Is that understanding correct?
Yes, sir, it is. The increase from 1819 to 1920 was an increase of 175%, from roughly 340 to over 1,000. Yes, sir.
And the formula in its current form would allow institutions with such general transfer associate degrees to receive formula credit for the student both at the associate level and then again at the baccalaureate degree level, correct?
In its current format, yes, sir.
So once again, just to make sure my understanding is correct, what you're recommending is that the institution or any institution with degrees of this format be allowed to capture that student from a completion perspective, just not be allowed to capture them twice.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, President Nolan. Any other clarifications needed here or other feedback? Okay, thank you. If you do have feedback offline, please feel free to send it to us, send it to me. We'll discuss it internally. We do plan to move forward with a recommendation to our commission on these two very topics. President Licari, we will be sure to incorporate your feedback into our materials for the commission as we would for any recommended changes.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, President Licari. All right, moving on to discuss proposed 5-year revisions, not for immediate action, but going forward for starting with 23-24 next year. The first one we would like to discuss today is a workforce investment premium. This would be a new addition completely to the formula as a focus population. To give some background context on this premium, we've had for years heard from different stakeholders, some universities, some community colleges, some state stakeholders, most recently Governor Bill Lee, has asked us to see if we can make this formula be more responsive to the workforce demands. Typically, the university and community college feedback has centered on the upfront cost to creating, say, STEM degrees or other high-cost degrees. And the stakeholder influence has been more about how can we make the formula more flexible for the immediacy needs. Ms. Collins is going to go over what our proposed recommendation on this measure is for both the university and the community college sector. It's taken a lot of surveying of how this is done in other states. How flexible does this need to be? What is the long-term projections? And what is the best dosage at our institutions? Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Stephen. I did notice while Stephen was presenting this section that Comptroller Mumpower, you did raise your hand, but then quickly lowered it. But I do want to make sure if you had comment on the previous recommendation on associate degrees that we gave you an opportunity to speak if you wanted to. Okay. Thank you, sir. If that does come up, please interrupt me at any time during this presentation on workforce investment. So, as Stephen mentioned, THEC staff began this process of developing the workforce investment premium by first determining the what. So, what should we be measuring? What is the definition of what degrees should be considered investment in workforce in Tennessee? THEC staff investigated possible methodologies for operationalizing this premium and determined that the high-need academic programs definition, already approved and included in our quality assurance funding, would be the best option as the starting place for this metric. So this slide shows which majors would count as a part of this workforce investment premium. So the Quality Assurance Funding Program High Need Academic Programs definition relies on a standardized federal coding system that our institutional partners will be very familiar with, and I'm sure many of our state stakeholders will as well, known as the Classification of Instructional Programs, or SIP codes. And this determines the academic programs that met high need within Tennessee. This definition incorporates SIP codes for programs that we would colloquially refer to as STEM, which should, all of the things that you think of when you hear STEM majors, like the SIP 11, which is for computer and information sciences, SIP 26, biological and biomedical sciences, 14 and 15 for engineering, etc. It also would include one that we probably think should be a member of STEM, but historically hasn't been, which is SIP 51, the health professions and related clinical sciences, so your nursing and allied health fields. THEC staff then analyzed the overlap of these SIP codes, identified as part of the high need academic programs, and then overlapped that with the long-term workforce needs of the state as defined by Jobs for TN and the ECD Key Indicators Report. And these were pulled in 2016. So we overlapped the SIP codes with another federal coding system known as SOC codes, which is probably more familiar to our state partners and maybe less so to our institutional partners. And that's the Standard Occupational Classification Codes. And what we found was fully 2/3 of the Jobs per TN top 10 long-term projected occupations and over 40% of the top 20 would be encompassed by this definition of STEM plus healthcare. Once a definition was identified, THEC staff began the operationalization process, identifying all undergraduate awards as eligible for a premium based on qualifying SIP codes. However, during this process, we discovered a technical issue with how associate degrees awarded at our community colleges are coded, so how they receive their SIP code. This technical difficulty, because 60% or so of associate degrees awarded by our community colleges are transfer degrees. So they have been coded as university parallel, which have their own SIP code, a SIP code of 16, which, if you'll recall, would not have fallen into the definition as identified under high need fields. So fully 60% of our associate degrees at our community colleges would not even have the opportunity to qualify, even if the student was, say, getting an associate's degree in engineering or mathematics, something that would normally have qualified because of a coding issue. So to ameliorate this, THEC staff propose including associate degrees completed at community colleges in a Tennessee transfer pathway. And in that Tennessee transfer pathway, that is in an area of emphasis, which is the university parallel equivalent of a major, that correlates to one of those qualifying SIP codes on the previous slide. Under this recommended definition, about 1/4 of all associate degrees, 1/3 of all bachelor's degrees, and over half of community college certificates would have qualified for this workforce investment premium in 1920. So based on the analysis completed by THEC staff and taking into account THEC policy and feedback provided by various stakeholders, including members of the formula working group and members of the committee, THEC staff are recommending the following proposed change related to a workforce investment premium. Implementation of a workforce investment premium that recognizes the completion of bachelor's and associate degrees at universities and associate degrees and long and short-term certificates at community colleges in majors aligned with high need academic programs. THEC staff are proposing to implement this recommendation by treating this non-demographic based premium similar to the current demographic based premiums already included in the formula. So as a member of those stackable, graduated, and elevated premiums we went over at the beginning of the presentation. This can be accomplished mechanically in a manner that meets the guiding principles previously discussed. So that is our recommendation today. President Glover, I do see that your hand is raised. If you'd like to start off the comments.
Yes, I would like to know if you are giving additional consideration to adding business and management information systems to the list of the strict list you have of STEM majors?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. That's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, we had determined to rely on simplicity for our institutions by aligning with the QAF definition at this time. However, during the review process, so in the next 5-year review, it is our intention to revisit this definition and to revisit the long-term projections for jobs. Those are very fluid. And if the long-term projections indicate that business should be included, we would absolutely include business. I believe management information systems might be a concern because it is in a multidisciplinary code, which includes many different degrees. There is a possibility, however, that we would be able to go to the 4-digit to include that one in a future iteration. Right now, we're, again, for simplicity, staying at the 2-digit level. So the management information systems, again, would be an option for review in the next iteration.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Martin?
Yes, I just had a couple of questions. One is, is there any consideration for areas of need that aren't defined as STEM? So for example, the flexibility to include teacher education or preparation down the road, identifying specific needs for the state and maybe regional needs, even not just statewide needs, but those that serve particular regions of the state that are in need. That's one question. And the other is thinking about graduate degrees. We need to be educating folks to be able to teach the next generation of STEM students, STEM undergraduates. And so thinking about graduate degree programs in the STEM disciplines, I just was wondering whether we've considered that as well.
Yes, thank you, Martin. I'm going to, you might have to remind me of the second one. I'm mentally remembering it was a graduate degree question, but I'll go back to the first one related to non-STEM degrees. So as I mentioned to President Glover, we are erring on the side of simplicity at this point. And so we are looking at a state need rather than, say, regional. Additionally, we did want to align with a predetermined and pre-approved definition for the first, go round of implementation. Related to education, my understanding is that it can be difficult to measure teacher need or in areas or even across the state because that field is so fluid. I think that probably the way that we're thinking about this is let's get it established. Let's use a predetermined definition that our institutions understand and can focus on because they're already focusing on that as part of QAF. Let's see how it works. Let's see if the institution responds to that because those are aligned already with long-term projections. And then let's revisit in 5 years and see if we can make it better. And I think in that 5-year conversation, we should absolutely talk about maybe regionalizing or looking at other non-STEM degree metrics like education, where maybe these are under the radar needs that are specific to, say, regional areas. I will say, as part of the QAF component, institutions are able to choose the underserved populations that they want to focus on. That's not something that the overall funding formula will probably move to anytime soon, this a la carte idea of funding or of outcomes. But I understand that within QAF, that's very useful for individual institutions to be able to tailor more closely to the needs of their area. Yes, ma'am.
Crystal, can I interrupt for a second before you answer Dr. Martin's second question? So we've mentioned a couple times that this is really our first pass at this, and that is correct. I don't want there to be confusion with any implication that we will not consider any changes until 5 years from now. Like, these discussions will be ongoing over the next 5 years. It is just the case that in 2025 or so will be the next official round of changes the way we're doing now. So just to clarify, even semantically, this is not us kicking the can that we're not going to talk about this for 5 years. We will just talk about it over the course of the next few years leading up to another big review in 5 years. So just to clarify that, because Dr. Martin and Dr. Glover both bring up good points about ways in which this can be tweaked, erring on the side of simplicity for the first go round. So thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. House. And that is She's absolutely right. That's very useful. Related to your graduate degree question. So we did talk about this very early on in the process. In fact, this metric, this idea of a workforce investment premium, was the first thing that we talked about in February 2020. We thought it was the beginning of a 5-month process that has turned into a 1.5 years so far. But I think during that, the tenor of that conversation around graduate degrees was that we wanted to focus on undergraduate degrees at this point, to be able to focus not only on the universities, but also on the community colleges. So our hope is that this workforce investment premium will actually, and the focus on Tennessee transfer pathways, will lead to better partnerships between our community colleges and our universities to produce employable graduates or graduates that are prepared and can transfer on to universities in these high need fields. But I think at the time, we determined that undergraduate degrees would be our focus. I don't know if Dr. Gentile wants to.
Well, I think that's the nature of this review committee, is to have a discussion on that. But when Dr. Martin, you brought that forward. I'm curious if there's any other thoughts on that matter about whether we should recognize this in the graduate program or not. As proposed initially in discussion over the years, it's been focused on undergraduate and the state stakeholders as well. But I'm curious if there are any other stakeholders here that have the same thought process as Dr. Martin from UT.
I think just to clarify, you've attempted to focus on the full array of educational opportunities that we provide in the state. And so that's a key component to what we're doing as a state. And I think that in the future, it's important to think about how we can incentivize kind of the full spectrum of educational opportunities.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's also a note that I don't think we made, and if we did, I apologize, Crystal, is that all the other focus populations are focused on the undergraduate population, so that would be a change here.
Yeah, I had not. Thank you, Stephen. So yeah, Stephen is correct. If we're intending to treat this new focus population premium similar to how we have treated focus population premiums in the past, those only apply to undergraduate degrees, and so that would also be a change. Peter, I see that your hand is raised. Do you have a comment or question about this?
Yes. Well, it's changed topics a little bit within that. That's all right.
Yes.
My question was mechanically about a little bit about the mechanics of how this would be calculated. You mentioned the demographic-based populations. Is this going to get mixed in with those categories and all calculated together, or is it going to be two separate calculations? And the reason I ask is, I know with the demographic groups, when a student comes in and they have one of those characteristics, that's worth a lot more of a bonus than the second one of those characteristics for the same student. And so I'm just wondering, if it's all mixed together, it seems to me that one of these degrees that we're focusing on would be worth less if a student already has one of the demographic characteristics, whereas if they don't have any of those, it would be worth more initially. So I'm just curious about what the plans are to be calculating that.
Yeah, Peter, this is a great point, and I'd really like to have this discussion now with members of the committee if we can. What THEC is presenting here on the slide is to mix it up, as you say, so that to your point, let's give an example. Let's say that a student right now is enrolled at Tennessee Tech University, and that student is majoring in engineering, and that student is low income. Before this premium is implemented, that student would get an 80% premium for being low income. Once this premium is implemented, they would then be 100% because they would get an additional 20% for the engineering degree. However, if you had a student at TTU that was not low income, that was in the same classes and majoring in the same thing and got an engineering degree, that student would get an 80% premium for that engineering degree, while the other student only got a 20% premium because they were already low income. So this is a good question, right? So this is a good policy discussion to have. We can either say that that's not a concern, even though there's a difference between, say, demographics of a student and non-demographic characteristics of a degree, or we could have a mechanical discussion of do we actually not stack these, and do we move the premium for this metric, this workforce investment premium, out on its own and set its own percentage increase so that it would not affect, it would not interact with any of the demographic premiums that already exist, but would be operating on its own. And so let's say we set it at 40%, and I'm not suggesting that as a THEC staff member, I'm just using it for the example purposes. In my previous example, your student who was low income would get a 40% premium. Your student who was not low income would get a 40% premium. So the demographics for those students would not change the value of the workforce investment premium to the institution. I think that's a great conversation to have, and I would be very interested to know what other committee members think about that. If anyone would like to talk.
Crystal, this is Phil. I mean that's consistent with the way we've treated other premiums in the past, is it not?
Yes, sir. So before we went to the stackable and graduated, you're right. Yes, each premium is worth just 40%. In the 15 review, we went to the graduated and elevated to increase that first one, and then be able to get us to, assuming that if you're low income, most likely you're probably also academically underprepared at a community college. So there's a lot of overlap between those two. So you're right, yes, sir. This is how we did treat the focused population premiums previously. So it would not be a mechanical issue to do that. I think that the point that Peter is making here, which is a good one, is that this premium is not a demographic premium. It is a degree premium. And so is that enough of a differentiation to maybe start it off as a non-stackable like we used to treat them? I'm not seeing any hands raised, but if there's anybody on the phone who would like to comment, please feel free to do so. Oh, Peter?
Well, I guess I'll just say that from the way I was looking at it, it's given that we're trying to incentivize an outcome from graduation here, to my mind, it does seem a little more logical to treat the degrees the same regardless of the demographic of the student coming in this circumstance. Just from so that keeping it separated so that a degree for a low-income student is worth the same as a degree for a non-low-income student has a logic to me. And that was just I'll just leave that there.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Are there any other comments on this premium in general? Okay.
President Licari is his name.
President Licari?
Yes, thanks. I guess I'm in agreement with that last point about keeping degrees consistent in terms of their value, regardless of who's earning them.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir.
Okay.
All right. Awesome.
We'll move on to the next outcome of discussion. This one is on the graduation rate. This graduation rate right now is a 6-year graduation rate, and Russell Van Zomeren, our Director of Fiscal Policy, will go into the details behind it and where we are right now with it. This is a graduation rate that is measured as it is in other states and at the federal definition level, typically a time and a half 6-year graduation rate. We have heard from some institutions a concern that there's only so much more you can grow on a current rate, especially when, say, 100% is the cap. And also has been proposed to us, like perhaps we should have a benchmark model for graduation rate, which you get to a certain level, you check a box to say that that is met for the institution given the inputs they're serving. That's not how the outcomes formula works. It is to promote productivity and increases in efficiencies. And so we did wonder, like maybe there's a point here that there is a cap on how much an institution can grow. can we shift this graduation rate to one that is better for the students in alignment with state policy, and we think would incentivize very good behavior at our universities, which is a movement towards a 4-year graduation rate. So for all the first-time, full-time students that come in, as an institution increases their graduation rate, they will, their 4-year graduation rate, they will seek more rewards in the formula. Russell Van Zomer is going to go into more detail on that in the background of it.
And if I can just interject one more time, sorry, Russell. To Stephen's point, this is a starting place. We've heard a lot of interesting feedback when we did our one-on-one calls with everyone, and that feedback ran the gamut of full support to full not support. So we understand there's a diversity of opinion here. And so to emphasize that this is in response to the initial discussion related to benchmarking graduation rates and just proposed to you all as a committee as one possible alternative. So that does not render moot at all anything Stephen just said. Good for the state, good for students, good for efficiency, but just so everyone is clear, this is not set in stone. This is very much open for discussion, particularly given the wide range of opinion and perspective folks brought to this on our individual calls. So I will stop there. Russell, go ahead.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Glad to guide us through this conversation. I'll echo the sentiments that Dr. Gentile shared a moment ago. We're chatting about this because it was a concern raised by several of our institutions that they might be reaching a peak or plateau in graduation rates, and that it'll be harder for them to grow that rate, understandably, given their institutional inputs and their incoming demographic of their student body. We did explore that benchmark model, and at this time, I think we need more time to be able to really figure out what we want to do there. It would be a fundamental change in the way that the formula worked. Of course, asking not growth, which is what we currently do, but maintenance of outcomes. And so we have opted to use our time between now and the next review cycle to look into what it would mean to switch this benchmark or this particular outcome to a benchmark. In lieu of that, and understanding that for some institutions, this is a high concern right now, we explored the opportunity to transition to an on-time graduation rate. So transitioning to a 4-year graduation rate as opposed to a 6-year. I will walk us through a little bit of the data where we're at right now, and then talk us through some of the policy implications before opening it up to the floor. I would love to hear your all thoughts, opinions on this. We've of course heard from the working group already. So with that, we can look at some of our graduation rates as they stand today, just so we have a baseline understanding of where we're at. So these are our 6-year graduation rates for the most recent cohort available, the 2014 cohort for all of our public universities. A reminder here, as we're looking at graduation rates, that graduation rates only reflect the graduation of students who begin at your institution as a first-time full-time freshman and who can graduate from anywhere. So we're using clearinghouse data. We will track these students even if they were to leave your institution and graduate from another institution. They will still count towards your graduation rate. The average 6-year graduation rate we're seeing at the 4 years is about 63%, so roughly 6 out of every 10 degree-seeking freshmen at our 4-year institutions earn an award within 150% time. Looking at the 4-year graduation rates, awesome. The average 4-year graduation rate, and again, just first-time full-time freshmen for your institution, the average 4-year graduation rate is about 39%. So roughly 4 out of every 10 degree-seeking freshmen at our 4-year institutions are earning an award on time. And then we can combine the two to look at how these two play together. Of course, every student who graduates in 4 years graduates within 6 years, and so they're already included in our current metric. What this policy would ask institutions to do is to turn the students who appear in these orange and gray bars into the blue bar. These are students who frankly are graduating, but taking longer than maybe they had planned. Next slide. Awesome. So some institutions have expressed concerns about their ability to grow their 4-year graduation rate for a variety of reasons, which is understandable. What we know is that over the lifetime of the formula, graduation rates have increased across all time intervals, but especially for 4-year graduation rates. So this slide shows, I think, the last 11 years of graduation rates. That blue line is 4-year, orange is 5, and gray is 6. You can see that our 6-year graduation rate is up 10 percentage points over this time frame, including a 6 percentage point growth over the last 4 cohorts. Our 4-year graduation rate is up 16 percentage points over this time frame, including 10 percentage points in the last 4 cohorts. What this is showing us is that most of the growth has actually been in the 4-year graduation rate. And in this regard, the 6-year graduation rate has had a bit of a muting effect on the growth that we've recognized within the formula and your subsequent appropriations. We run, of course, a growth-based model, and internal analysis that we've done suggests that had we made this change during the prior formula review with no new money, it would have increased appropriations at 7 of our 9 universities. This chart helps us understand 3 things that I would like us to take away. First, more students are graduating, which is absolutely wonderful. Of course, we're excited about that. Even more importantly, perhaps, more students are graduating on time. And finally, institutions have begun to shrink the gaps between the 4, 5, and 6-year graduation rates over time, which you can see as there's a smaller gap between that 4-year blue line, 5-year orange line, and then 6-year gray line. This policy, a transition to a 4-year on-time graduation rate, would reinforce behavior that many of your institutions have already begun. Next slide. Awesome. So now I want to talk a little bit about policy. We can set the data aside for just a moment. Thinking about it more conceptually, what this policy would do and for who. The first and most important group that we think about as we make these changes is, of course, the students themselves. For students, we have historically used the 6-year graduation rate, and we've done this as an acknowledgement that graduating often takes students longer than they had anticipated. However, few students enter college hoping to take 5, 6, or more years to graduate with their degree, and for good reason. There are real costs associated with delayed graduation. Students delaying graduation have additional tuition fees, room, board, as well as opportunity costs. And some research we've found suggests that these costs could add up to over $100,000 for a student over their lifetime from delaying graduation by a single year. In short, graduating students in 4 years or fewer keeps these costs down for students and allows them to enter the labor market as highly skilled individuals. But of course, it's not just students that we're concerned about as we move forward. You all would want to know how this impacts your institutions and, of course, the state. So for institutions, we do recognize that graduations have a hard cap at 100% and a functional cap somewhere short of that. We know, as much as we might want to, that not every institution can graduate 100% of the students that show up on their door. Our average 6-year graduation rate right now, again, is 63%. Our average 4-year graduation rate is 39%. There's a lot more room between 39 and 100 than there is between 63 and 100. Transitioning to an on-time graduation rate provides you more room to grow as we continue to figure out what's best for our graduation rate outcome going forward. Also, increases in 4-year graduation rate would indicate that institutions had increased their efficiency and would also provide more immediate returns on other outcomes within the formula. We would be rewarding institutions for behavior they've already begun and further incentivizing this behavior going forward. And lastly, for the state, increased graduation rates are mentioned in THEC's master plan and are a key part of our Drive to 55 initiative. And the state, of course, wants to promote efficiency in all aspects of higher education. Transitioning to a 4-year graduation rate would allow us to promote this efficiency further. With that, I'll open it up to the floor if anybody has comments or suggestions. Looks like Dr. Glover has her hand raised.
President Glover?
Apologize, I was muted. I would say thank you for putting together this presentation and for discussing this at this level. I do have a concern that I'd like to raise. I'm concerned about what this will do to certain populations. I think while not intended, it would tend to have a negative effect on the poor students and the minority students. I'm wondering if we're really understanding why students don't graduate in certain populations. lack of resources, and when you have Pell eligible students, we're trying to help students get educated. If it hurts more students, then it will help certain universities, and then that's a problem for us. If it's gonna hurt more, poor students. What I'm saying is that poor students.
President Glover, okay.
Okay.
President Glover, can you start off that sentence again? You went out just for a minute.
You're breaking up a little bit.
I'm so sorry. The low income and low wealth students don't have the resources to finish, don't always, and unlikely, they have resources to finish in 4 years. They come from first generation backgrounds. I know because I see them each and every day at a much higher percentage than anyone else on this call. And they come from the first generation backgrounds, which often lend itself to a longer matriculation period. And they often need to work to support themselves. We have 2/3 of our population in Tennessee State work. And knowing that the majority, that many of our students work, we try to have avenues available. Many of them leave campus earlier so they can go to work in the afternoons. It's a necessity based on their socioeconomic backgrounds. Well, again, we're here to serve a student. We all have different missions. If our mission is serving every student, because I believe we can our university can take any student from any population and make that student a scholar. Given that that's our mission and that's our commitment, why would we then cut the legs off from students who have to work to get themselves to school? We don't have that population where we're saying that they can, we're going to have more efficiencies they graduate. Yes, that's a given. But you look at why they're not graduating. So I just think that we don't want to hurt those institutions whose student profile is more associated with those disadvantaged students. Thank you.
Dr. House, this is Sidney McPhee. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good to hear you.
First, let me say that we all can agree that we want our students to graduate as quickly as possible. And I think if you look at the programs that our institutions across the board have, you will see that. That's our goal, to get them out as quickly as possible. I'm not sure if you all looked at your 21-22 funding formula data that showed focus population and showed where those students are located with regards to Pell eligible, low income, and the numbers of students. Look at the percentages, then look at the raw numbers of graduates. First, at MTSU, majority of our students from the rural area, Pell eligible, many of them first generation college students, they work an average of 40 hours a week or more. We've done survey of that. Life happens. We have a significant number of adult students who they don't drop out, they stop out because life happens to them. But then take a look at the number of graduates that MTSU generates each year. You go to a 4-year graduation rate, you are going to force institutions like MTSU to raise its admission standards so only students who can come and spend 4 years full-time on a campus will end up benefiting from the education of this state. I think you have to really be concerned about some unintended consequences of this action. And I think you should really study your population and where those students, the demographics. Obviously, those of us who were very fortunate to be on scholarship or have parents who can fund our education, that was our main purpose, our main goal. Our job was to go to school. We didn't work 40 hours. This is a different environment, economic and demographic environment that we're dealing with. Now, does it mean that we should not pursue? We actually developed a program called Graduate in 4 and Earn More, and we saw some increase in we continue to push that. But the reality is your demographics, and it's not has to do just with minority students. Yes, minority students are all, but we have a significant amount of students who are Pell eligible from rural area, and they are struggling financially, and they're not in a position to go to an institution and focus exclusively on just studying. They have to pay their way, they have to work, families, life gets in the way, they come back and they graduate. So I would cautiously ask you to be careful the direction that you head in with this particular recommendation.
Thank you, President McPhee. I just want to add some analysis that we have done to address some of those points. Russell, and please correct me if I'm off here, has done analysis on how many students start off as full-time and do drop down to part-time while they are in the university. And we were able to use clearinghouse data to help out with this as well. I believe it's about 25 to 30% of students drop down to part-time. Many of them do go back to full-time. But that is generally the rate on average across the universities. It's pretty consistent across the universities. So I believe the concern of the population that might drop down is that for job purposes. That is also showing that perhaps that's not the reason why the graduation rates are on average in 38% for a four-year graduation. There might be some other factors like those students are just dropping out completely to explore, and we would think that a four-year graduation rate might incentivize them not to drop out. That's a hopeful possibility there. Dr. Martin, you had your hand raised. Linda Martin?
Sorry about that. My understanding is that this is in addition to other pieces of the formula that recognizes low-income students and all degrees awarded regardless of time to degree. And so it's incentivizing us to think about ways to enhance graduation rate. At the same time, it's incentivizing us to focus on low-income students and making sure that all students that are accepted earn a degree. It's still part of the bigger picture in my mind.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sorry, yes, ma'am. If you think about this as a portfolio of outcomes that we have, this is just one of those outcomes. In general, our formula does incentivize access through the low-income population, adult population, but also a general count. The more you graduate outside of the rate, the more money you will get. The graduation rate is one efficiency metric within it.
And interestingly, I think over the lifetime of this model, we refer to the entire model itself as an incentivization tool, because the sooner you can get a student through, the sooner that student counts, the sooner you get money. And so again, as Stephen mentioned, using counts does take into it, does allow for maybe an extended timeline. So we're not going to penalize you if a bachelor's degree takes more than 4 years. We'll count it if it takes 6, 10, 12, 15, whenever it happens, we count it. But for the institution, the best thing to do is to get the student through, because then you get your funding from the state, and that student has an education and a degree as soon as possible. President Nolan, I see that your hand is also raised.
Yes, thank you. A question around applicability across sectors. If you were to move in a direction from the federally prescribed 6-year rate to a 4-year rate in the formula, would you also make an adjustment for the community college sector, taking that metric down to a 2-year level?
Sir, right now, the community college sector does not have a graduation rate in it. It is an efficiency metric, the awards per 100 FTE. So looks at the ratio between how many awards you give out to your FTE to recognize that there are fewer first-time, full-time freshmen in the community college sector. So we do not have a graduation rate in the community college sector, so we would not make any change.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
President Licari?
Yeah, regarding the conversation about moving, the graduation rate for a variety of kinds of students, I appreciate those concerns because I've got a student body that shares many of those features. Have you at THEC broken out the movement, the improvement, or perhaps lack thereof, in terms of 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates across all of our institutions by type of student, demographically? I mean, are we right? I mean, aggregately, we've seen some nice improvements, but are we leaving people behind as we move more successfully for others?
President Licari, that is an excellent question, and I think that's a good push for a potential analysis that we can do on our end before the next formal review committee. Because again, this is a conversation on this metric that'll take longer than this meeting. We can look into that. There might be some difficulties with the data and doing that specifically, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Sidney McPhee. I want to join President Licari and his comment, and that's my great concern. You look at average, and you're looking at the big picture. You need to really dig deeper and look at the demographics and where students are, particularly when the state is interested in bringing up the educational level of its population. And yeah, this will benefit some institutions where their median family income is double that of some other institutions where median family income is not even as high as one would think. But look at the impact that this is going to have across the board and individually with certain demographic groups. And it's the reason why the federal government and others have the 6-year graduation overall, as opposed to the 4-year. And I want to state again, we all are working hard to get students out as quickly as possible. But the reality is we are in a state with a very low educational achievement level. Students come in with all kinds of needs and issues. And to move in this direction, I think, would be ill-informed.
All right, sir, thank you. We'll add to our analysis the demographics that you recommended for our next round of conversations on this. President Glover?
I was going to make one last point. That is that, again, we say it's all of us are here all of us want to make sure students are educated. That's the mission. That's definitely our mission. However, if we look at the demographics, and I think that's an excellent point, just look at that and make sure there's no penalty, that it's not an inadvertent penalty imposed based on the institution's student profile. I mean, that's my concern, because if so, in our doing, it seems so unfair and almost borders on being discriminatory. And that's what we're not trying to, and we know that's not the intent, but if that's the result of it, it has the same goal. So let's just make sure we take a deeper look at this, a deeper dive at this one, because I see no good coming out of it.
Thank you, President Glover.
Yeah, thank you all for those comments. And as Stephen said, before this group convenes again, before we meet again, we will have some additional analysis done in this manner. So thank you all for that, President Licari, Glover, and McPhee for those comments.
We have 15 minutes left, and as I promised, I want to leave room for conversation on things that are not on our agenda that you would like for us to look into. But before we do, I just want to tee up the subject on fixed costs to give you a direction of where we're going. I know we've talked to each and every one of you about this element. Just as a reminder, fixed costs right now comprise 20% of the overall appropriation request. It is based on E&G, education in general, space. You receive a premium for non-renovated space older than 20 years, equipment inventory, rental space, etc. Again, this influences 1/5 of all appropriations. The incentive in place right now is for you as institutions, specifically, to the institutions on this call to increase your footprint. As you increase your footprint, you will receive more money in our appropriations. So as you demolish space on campus, you'll lose money. As you renovate space on campus, you'll lose money. Many of the stakeholders on this call and THEC itself has had a strong focus over the last 5 years on calling for efficiency of space in the capital outlay review process that we run and provide our recommendations to our commission and to the government. We ask for what your space utilization is, how much space you have per FTE based on different classifications, and we highly incentivize renovation. That policy for capital policy goes against this formula policy with fixed costs. Next slide, please. So over the next couple of meetings with this body, we just want to tee up the subject for potential solutions to this policy disjointment. We've talked about this extensively with the working group and other stakeholders. One thing that we could do over a 3 to 5 year period is phase out fixed costs completely from the influence on the appropriation. That would mean that all influence would come from outcomes specifically. We're not taking money away. It's just as you reduce or expand your footprint, that has no influence on the appropriation. Another policy option in front of us is to reduce fixed costs. So not phase it out completely, but perhaps reduce it to say 10%. And we could implement some volatility dampenings so that when you demolish space on campus, you don't automatically lose a lot of appropriations. We could implement a 3-year average of your campus footprint, much like we do with outcomes. Then a third solution that is not the status quo is to streamline fixed costs. Keep it the same as it is right now as far as its influence, but remove things that just directly go against state policy direction, like removing the non-renovated premium or some other entities therein. We could move again in here to a 3-year average to limit further volatility. So these are the things that we'd like to consider over the coming months as we move forward in this 5-year review. Again, not for direct conversation today because we're running out of time, but I just wanted to tee up for the next time. This would most likely be the first agenda item on the next meeting. Right. That said, I do want to open up the conversation to any general discussion from our stakeholders on elements that we have not addressed today, that were not on our agenda. Are there items or analysis you would like our team to look into over the coming months to help inform our conversation and discussion? Dr. Martin.
I had my hand raised before and I just wanted to make a comment about the graduation rate and maybe a possible modeling that could be done. And that is, there's some predictive models out there looking at, based upon the type of institution and the students that are attending that institution, some predictive modeling on what 4-year and 6-year graduation rates should be. Is there a way to incentivize those institutions that exceed what the predictive modeling would indicate? So what it's saying is that you're helping your students graduate more quickly than the predictive model would indicate that they should, based upon Pell eligible, first gen, all of those kinds of factors. And so it's rewarding people who are adding value or helping students, and it's leveling the playing field. And I think that might be something that would be worth considering. It also gets to that point where you're sustaining excellence, because the higher you get, the harder that incremental change might be. And so it might solve that. I see Dr. Glover shaking her head no, that it's not, but it does. You reach a certain level, and those incremental changes are harder to make. So just a thought for modeling. I don't have the answers. I'm just saying it might be a way to look at it and see if we're really incentivizing the things that we ought to be incentivizing.
Great, thanks, Dr. Martin. We can follow up with you offline on that discussion as appropriate. Stephen, were you going to say something? No.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Is there anyone else with a hand up for just this further discussion? Anything we're missing? Anything this group wants to bring while we are all together that is outside the other agenda items? Acknowledging, again, this will be the first of a few discussions. This is not like a speak now or forever hold your peace kind of situation.
Okay.
You can do out of state
We have 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Up to you.
We're going to address one more item before we close out that we think may not have as much conversation. But if it does, excellent, and we can continue that on in the next meeting. This is with regards to the low-income focused population. The low-income focused population, as you know, is rewarded in both the university and the community college sector. Presently, on how we collect the data, we collect that data from THEC, our scholarship corporation that is part of THEC, their collection of FAFSAs associated with scholarships given out to Tennesseans. Our low-income focused population therefore only recognizes in-state low-income students. That is a quirk of how we measure it. That is not a policy decision. There is no other differentiation in in-state versus out-of-state outcomes or focused populations in the model. If you're an out-of-state adult, you'll receive a focused population premium therein. We have been working with institutions to devise a good way through data integrity to get that information directly from institutions on their out-of-state low-income students that we can then apply going forward as focused populations. We feel really good about it. Our director of student information systems feels good about our ability to gather that information from TBR, UT, and the LGIs. And we would implement that in the next 5-year process. This is more of a concern for our border institutions, University of Memphis, Chattanooga State, ETSU, UT Chattanooga, those that are right there on the border that are serving students in their community who, unfortunately to them, are not Tennesseans, but they're still in that community of that institution. They receive in-state tuition based on institutional policies. They're not counted, even though an institution might be successful with those students. So again, our recommendation is to formally expand the data collection process to include out-of-state students in the focused population premium, to align with all other premiums and outcomes in the formula. Are there any thoughts and feedback on this change?
I think the most important point to emphasize, as Stephen just said, is that this was not an active policy decision. This was a data limitation that we have found a way to remedy. I'm sorry. President Licari, yes, sir.
Yeah, you didn't list us as a border institution, even though we could walk to.
Yes,
Kentucky.
sir. I apologize.
That's all right. Sorry. Sorry, sir.
No, I support this as I would imagine my colleagues in those other institutions. We have a lot of students from Kentucky, and our Fort Campbell military personnel oftentimes get coded as out-of-state students.
Thank you. President Licari, as I was listing institutions, I realized I'm going to miss some, and that's not a mistake to start.
That's the danger when you start doing that, right? You're going to miss something.
That's right.
All right. Any other comments or questions about this particular metric? Hopefully this is pretty straightforward and again just reflects a change to the way we're able to collect data, but it's not a change to policy per se.
Yep.
All right. Well, with 4 minutes remaining, are there any other quick questions or comments from anybody? No. All right, I will give everybody about 3.5 minutes back in their day, but many, many thanks to everyone for your time. These are very important conversations. Really appreciate that. Most importantly, to Stephen, Crystal, and Russell, who are here in the room with me, who do the lion's share of this work, not only every 5 years, but literally every day of every month of every year. So thank you very, very much to the three of them. Very much national experts in this space, and they work harder than anybody here, particularly on this issue. Yes, thank you. Round of applause. So very, very lucky to be sitting in between all of them and lean on them for their actual knowledge about this. So on that note, thank you all for your time. Hopefully everybody has a wonderful rest of the week. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday this past week and have recovered from that. And we will get another meeting of this group on the calendar very soon. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all.